Hi, good evening, everyone. We'll be starting in a few minutes. We are expecting a few more people to join, and yes, we'll be recording. So we have also live streamed. We are also live streaming the webinar to YouTube, our YouTube channel. So we'll be sharing that link. So after the streaming is done, you can access the webinar recording.
Should we start?
Yeah, I think we can start.
Okay. Hello everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Thanks a lot for joining. So a few rules. First of all, we'll be sharing the recording with everyone who has joined as a YouTube link. Secondly, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please put it in the chat. Since the size of this call is pretty large, we'll be going through all of the questions towards the end and also during the webinar itself so that we can address all of your questions. So let's get started. We are Team Videsh and our main goal is to help you land your dream university. We are pretty active on LinkedIn and we have conducted more than 15 webinars last year in 2023. This is our second webinar of 2024. In case you have not known about us, so my name is Raj. He's my twin brother Rajat and a very, very close friend of ours, Vidat. We know each other for the past 10 years now. We graduated from IIT Madras in 2017-18 And then we applied to grad school. During that time, when we applied, we got admits at MIT, Stanford, Caltech, Purdue, Princeton, UIUC, Georgia, Michigan, ETH, Zurich, all the top universities of the world. So eventually, me and Shridat went to MIT for our PhD, and Rajat went to Purdue. While we were at our colleges doing our PhD, we really learned and appreciated the value of doing research. So all of our webinars, if you have attended one before, are very heavily geared towards doing research and the importance of student research. Here you can see us giving talks, seminars. So we really, really appreciate, understand, and value the importance of doing research. Last year, actually, all of us came back to India after finishing our PhD. And now we dedicate our entire time to help candidates in their process of applying for a grad school. When we applied, we went through a lot of struggle because it was really very hard to find good advice. And it just was a lot of pain for us to understand the best practices. The reason we conduct these webinars is that we can give this information to you in the best possible manner so that you can plan your journey as soon as possible, and that to get into the top universities of the world. So let's get started. Today we have a number of agenda points to cover. We'll be starting with the basics of the grad school application, moving into university shortlisting, followed with the documents needed for the grad school, such as SOP, LOR, resume, GRE, TOEFL. And finally, we'll be talking a lot about building your research profile and the signature and extremely successful long-term mentorship cohort, which we conducted in 2023, which has started again now in 24. Of course, we'll have a Q&A session towards the end, which will be going through all the chat questions which you have put. So let me get started with the first part. Initially, I'll be going through an overview of the grad school application process and the broad level decisions which you need to make before getting deeper into it. The first decision which you will need to make is whether you want to go for a master's degree or whether you want to go for a PhD. And this is a very, very important decision. The only reason, in my experience, that you should choose a PhD degree is either you love doing research or you want to be in academia for the long run. If you have no experience doing research in your undergraduate or in your work experience, then PhD is a risky choice because in the USA it takes about 5 years to graduate. So you're committed for that much amount of time without really knowing what you're getting into. Research is a big commitment and it's not easy if you don't know what you are getting into. But if you love doing research, like I like doing research in my undergrad, so I chose a PhD. This is the best option for you. You'll really enjoy your time. Secondly, the safest bet for students who are not sure what research is and who have not done too much research is to go for a master's. The reason is that after finishing masters, you have two options. You can either go to an industry, join a startup, or do a PhD. That way, it's less risky and many options remain open for you. The downside of masters we'll get to later is that it's difficult to get funding. It's quite difficult to get a scholarship or a fellowship for a master's, and typically students have to take an educational loan. On the other hand, PhDs are nearly 100% funded in USA, Europe, Australia, all the places of the world. So that way you don't have to worry about spending single money from your pocket. You either get a research assistantship or you get a teaching assistantship. We'll go into details of what these mean towards the latter part of this presentation. But for now, you just need to know that these are the different decision points which you will need to finally decide whether you want to go for a master's or PhD. Let's say you have made this decision. You will need some basic documents in shape. You will need an SOP. You will need a very nicely formatted CV or a resume. You will need 3 letters of recommendation. And they need to be strong letters from people whom you have worked with in a personal capacity. Then you will need a strong research profile and you need good GRE TOEFL scores. We'll be going through all of these sections separately later, but this is just a broader view. Secondly, in terms of the cohorts itself, there are two cohorts or two intakes in grad school. One is the fall intake, which is the most common. So if you are planning to apply for fall 25, the deadlines will usually close in December of 24. So you have about 1 year for preparation. Whereas if you are going for the spring, the new semester starts in the university in January of 25. In the fall, the new semester starts in the university in September of 25. So if you are applying for spring, the deadlines usually close in June, July, or August. So you have less time. You have about 5 to 6 months. Generally, most of the people go for the fall intake. So these are the basic decisions which you need to make. Let's say now you are a student and you have decided, okay, I will go for a master's and I'm ready to make all these documents and I will apply for the fall. Now let's get started. The second thing which you will need to decide is which universities which you are planning to apply for. And this is not an easy decision to make. Basically, what students typically do is that they get very stressed towards when the application deadline comes and they just look at the QS university rankings and they just look at their GPA and they think, okay, I will not get here, I'll get here. And they make a random list of 8 to 10 universities. But that is not a good way to shortlist universities because so many things matter. If you have a strong research profile, it can offset your GPA. What we usually recommend students is to maintain an Excel sheet like this. This is an Excel sheet which we had created for a student enrolled in our long-term mentorship. Here you can see that first we started with a list of 25-30 universities. We made a very detailed column of the deadline. What are the LOR letters of recommendation requirement, GRE requirement, minimum GPA, etc. The most important thing is the second column, the classification of easy, medium, and hard. And this should never be done just from the QS university rankings. The way we do it is that we have a huge number of past applicant data who have applied. So when you join the long-term mentorship, what we do is we compare your profile with these past applicants, and then we take several things into account like your GPA, your research profile, and then we classify the universities as easy, medium, and hard. So the easy, medium, dream rule is generally go for 3 easy, 3 medium, and 3 dream universities. So I applied for 10 universities following this rule. Of course, MIT and Stanford were my dream universities because the acceptance rate is very low. So please do not randomly select universities. It is very important to select the universities in a proper manner, considering your GPA, your research profile, any other industrial strong experience which you have, etc. And this Excel sheets you can start maintaining as soon as possible. No need to finalize the universities right now, but why don't we just maintain an Excel sheet which has the university list of your interest so that things don't get stressful later. Now let me come to one of the most important aspects of the application process, or one of the most important documents of the application process. It is the statement of purpose. Out of all of the documents which are needed, a statement of purpose or SOP probably stands out as the most important. And there are many reasons for it. First of all, for students in this call or working professionals who are not aware of what an SOP is, an SOP is basically your story. It's your story which you tell to the admissions committee regarding why they should take you as a candidate and why you will be a good fit to the university. It's very different than a resume because resume is just a bunch of objective points. In an SOP, you can be subjective. You can give your reasons for, let's say, why your CGPA decreased during this particular semester. You can give reasons for saying that the low GPA has been compensated by a very strong research profile. You can say things like your work is aligned with this particular professor. So you can tell your story. And that's why this document is very important because it is kind of the only document which tells the admission committee about your story, your struggles, and your difficulties, which will be different from all the other students. So then the question is how to write the perfect SOP. And this is not an easy document to write. For me, it took around 2.5 months on 10 iterations to write this document in the first place. But I've condensed my learnings into these set of slides so that it gives you an understanding of how to start writing the best SOP. Please don't just write an essay, which is a very long essay, and it does not read like a good story. You need to think of an SOP in terms of your life story in these four aspects: the thread, the hook, the supporting cast, and casting the net. In my experience of looking at more than 300 SOPs now, a strong SOP really has all these four elements. Now, you may be thinking that, okay, what do these elements actually mean? So let me go through each of these elements separately and tell you what they actually mean. I'll also provide snapshots of my own SOP, which got me admitted into MIT. The first thing to remember before starting to write your SOP is to ask yourself the question: does my SOP have a unifying vision which binds it together? Every single paragraph of your SOP should be directed towards this vision. So let me provide a practical example for this. So these are three paragraphs taken from my SOP. Let me read some lines. This very pursuit has inspired me to deeply explore the field of fluid mechanics and to create an impact in this field. I am keen to create such an impact by pursuing a master's degree followed by PhD at MIT. This is the first para. Then a para on the second page. A master's degree followed by PhD at MIT becomes an ideal choice for me to create an impact by leveraging the knowledge gained in fluid mechanics. You see, when someone goes through my SOP, they will know one thing for sure, that my entire SOP is only about fluid mechanics. It is very clear. There is only one unifying vision which binds my entire SOP together. And that vision is that I want to create an impact in fluid mechanics. When I see SOPs of candidates, sometimes I see physics, computational mathematics, quantum mechanics, all of it scattered throughout in separate paragraphs. What that does is that does not bind your SOP together into one thread. And so it feels that your application is scattered or your application is weak. Let's say you have done work in chemical engineering and mechanical and the energy sector, and your question is, how do I find a unifying vision? Try to find the common thing among all of this. Maybe the common thing is dynamical systems. If you have done work in chemical, mech and energy, why don't you have your thread as creating an impact in dynamical systems? That is an umbrella thread which encompasses all these three things. Second point to note is, if you're cross applying, let's say you are a student in physics or mathematics, but you're applying to CS, then your thread will be computer science. Then don't write about physics at all. Make that commitment and stick to the new field where you're applying for. Second thing, which is probably the most important of these four aspects, is the hook. The hook is that aspect of your story which is your biggest strength. It can be your GPA, it can be a publication, it can be being part of a prestigious internship. This is the thing which catches the attention of the admissions committee and separates you from the rest. So look at these two paragraphs of my SOP. I think these two paragraphs got me admission into MIT because there are so many people applying from my batch, and my class rank was around 10 or 11, but only I got into MIT. The reason is because my hook was very clear, and it was that I had a publication in the Journal of Fluid Mechanics. You see, I have written a journal paper describing the above work is in preparation, and we planned it to submit it by the end of December to the Journal of Fluid Mechanics. That's a brilliant point to have because this is a very prestigious journal. If you are a student or a working professional listening to this, if you have a publication or a conference presentation, it makes a huge difference to the application. These are some of the best hooks which we have seen in profiles. Almost everyone who gets admitted to MIT, Stanford, these top places, they have some sort of a research publication, and not in a random venue. It has to be in a venue which is impactful. It has to be in a venue which is prestigious. And even if you have just one of these, it makes a huge difference. It doesn't need to be your publication. It can be an internship where you contributed and added a lot of value. It can be anything else. It can be a GPA, of course. The good thing about the hook is that if you don't have it yet, it can be cultivated. So if you have a low GPA, please do not worry, because you can develop many other hooks. If you are in a second year or third year, you can try working with a professor for a research publication. If you're in an industry and if you have lost touch with research and if you are thinking what my hook is going to be, even you are in a good position to work on a publication. In the long-term mentorship, we have coached both industry people as well as students to have that first publication, even if their GPA is low. The third thing is the supporting cast. So basically, our life does not go in a linear manner, right? I told you to have a unifying vision, but we all have done random things which are not really tied to one vision, and it's fine to have these. They add depth to your SOP. The important thing to recognize is that when you have these, try to somehow link it to your thread. So, for example, I had done an internship at ITC, which was no way related to my thread of fluid mechanics. But the way I started this paragraph, see, a passion for creating an impact, led me to two pursuits. Then I wrote this ITC thing, and I ended it again with the fact that a master's degree becomes an ideal choice for me by leveraging the knowledge in fluid mechanics. So this is kind of a sandwich technique. You sandwich your supporting cast in the middle of your thread. So you start with the thread, end with the thread, and then in the middle you have your supporting cast. That way it does not feel scattered. Finally, you need to cast your net. In the last two paragraphs of your SOP, you have to make your pitch to the admissions committee that why would you be a good fit. There, here you also have to mention the research groups which you are interested to work with. For example, look at the last two paragraphs of my SOP. In the second last paragraphs, I have clearly mentioned the research groups which I am interested to work with. Like Gareth McKinley's group, I have written the interests of this group very well aligned with mine. Then I also mention Kernick Research Group, and I say that the impactful work here aligns very well with mine. So then it feels that, okay, this student has done his or her research about this university, and they also mention why their work is aligned with the professor. And finally, in the last paragraph, you have to make your pitch. You have to make your pitch and say that why should the university take you? So here you see, I have written that I feel that with the experience of doing both experimental and theoretical research and the knowledge gained from courses, I would be able to contribute positively to the research output of MIT. This was my pitch. The mistake many students make is that in the last paragraph, they'll write about what they will gain from the university. So they write that I will be honored to be a part of this great university community, etc. But they do not write what they bring to the table. So it's a two-way street, right? You also have to mention how you can contribute to the university's output. That's why the pitch is very important, and you have to make sure you have a strong pitch. If your hook is there, right? If your hook is strong, you can make a very strong pitch. So finally, just summarizing, a unified thread coupled with a strong hook, coupled with a supporting cast, coupled with a very strong pitch, make for a very, very strong SOP. And the first thing to start is thinking of your thread. And just first write down some paragraphs regarding your thread and then think about the hook. If you don't have a hook, please spend time to develop it. And having a research paper does not necessarily take 2-3 years. It can be done even in a matter of 3 to 5 months if you spend that much time. Then think of the pitch. Research about the groups you are interested in that university and fill it in the Excel sheet. When you make the university Excel sheet, also write about the groups you are interested in so that when the time comes to draft the SOP, you have this ready. Great. So in this section, we covered the basics of the grad school committee, university shortlisting, and SOP. Just a final set of do's and don'ts on the SOP is that do not write too many anecdotal examples. This does not work. Cheesy stuff does not work for the most part. So do not write 2 to 3 times that Albert Einstein said this and I believe this, or Elon Musk said this, I believe this, etc. Write about your work. Write about how your work makes you a good candidate. Then look at standard templates. If somebody tells you that creating SOP using standard templates is a bad idea, they could mostly be wrong, because there is a reason why some SOPs are successful, right? There are some ways to write a specific story, and if you have these standard templates, then you essentially follow that story. So we did that. We took the standard templates from our seniors, and we provide these templates also during the long-term mentorship. And finally, spend quality time on your SOP. Please get it reviewed by some people who can add value to your SOP. No need to get it reviewed by 15-20 people, but get it reviewed by 2 to 3 people whom you trust and who can contribute to giving you critical but at the same time constructive feedback. Now let's move to part 2, which will be covered by Dr. Rajat Dandekar about letters of recommendation, resume, and GRE TOEFL prep. Can you enable the participant screen sharing option?
Yeah.
Okay, now it is all right.
Is it working? I'll make you this.
Yes, it is working. Okay. Hello, everyone. So in the first section, we have covered the first document in the application process, which is the statement of purpose. The second document, which is equally important, are the letters of recommendation. Now, this is something which many students actually take very lightly, but it forms one of the most crucial documents of your entire story. The reason is that it brings a lot of credibility to your application. Letters of recommendation are documents where people endorse you for uh, for your skill sets, and they essentially validate a lot of the points you have already mentioned in your SOP or your resume. Of coherency to your application, and it binds all the documents together. If the letters were not there, what is the proof, right, that you have actually done these things? So now, when it comes to the letters of recommendation, there are three things which are extremely important. The first is the credibility of the people who are writing these letters for you. The second is the diversity of the letters, and the third is the strength of the letters. Now, let's go over these 3 points in detail. When I mean credibility, I mean the designation of the person that is writing the LOR. For example, an LOR written by a PhD student is less credible compared to an LOR which is written by a professor or a head of the department. So, whenever you're facing a dilemma between these two, try to select people who are much higher in the chain. For example, the CEO of the company that you're working in gives a lot more credibility compared to the manager who is managing your work. So this is the first point. Second is the diversity. When I applied for my PhD, I had 3 letters of recommendation, of which 2 were from my professors in India and one was from a professor in Germany with whom I had done an international internship. International internship is very important to create that diversity in your statements, because it uh, it gives this impression on the admission committee that you are a person who have worked not just in your domestic country, but you are also open to international collaborations. So that is very important. Diversity can also come from having a mix of academia plus industrial letters of recommendation. So generally, we recommend to go with a combination of 2 letters from academia and 1 letter from industry. Now, the third point, which is extremely important, is the strength of the document. So imagine how will you get an LOR which is very strong. It will not come from a person under whose supervision you have worked for maybe 2 or 3 months, because they would have only so much to write about you. But a professor under whom you have worked for a year or more than a year is going to end up endorsing you and write a very glowing letter of recommendation. So for me, that was the case actually. I got one letter of recommendation from a professor with whom I had approached in my third year itself for wanting to do a research project. And so this is very important. If you want to have a very strong letter of recommendation, try to build at least one relationship which is long term. If you are in an university, try to get in touch with prolific professors in your department and approach them a bit early, which gives you a head start, and you stay connected with them for at least a year. This is the same if you are working. If you are working, try to form relations which go above your managers, or try to do remote internships with international professors in different universities. The more you connect with professors for a longer duration, the more is the chance of you getting a favorable or a glowing letter of recommendation. So this is extremely important. That's why this is not something that should be thought of at the last moment. So for example, if December 15 is the deadline of the application, there are several students who actually come to us and tell us that, okay, I have not thought about the letter uh, of recommendations from whom I'm going to get these letters. So then it's really late for us to be suggesting professors at this point, because this is something which has to be planned at least 6 months to 1 year in advance. Now, okay, so when it comes to the letter itself, there are 2 types. Sometimes the professor or the manager will say that I want the letter to remain confidential. So they will write the letter on your behalf, which is what happened in my case. However, recently we are seeing that several professors are asking the students to first write the LOR, and then uh, they will read the LOR and directly submit. Most of the times what happens is that professors are not having time to go through the LOR in detail. So this gives a lot of control in the hands of the student. Basically, whatever you are going to write is going to end up being read by the admission committee. That's why how you write the letter of recommendation becomes extremely important. And we provide a lot of help to the students in crafting a letter of recommendation which is very strong. So there is a big difference between a generic LOR and an exceptional LOR, and it's really dependent on the way the words are framed. So you can see there are two comparisons which we have given at the bottom. Both the things are saying the same, but the exceptional paragraph is sounding very impressive. Now, recently we have seen a lot of trend, and please pay attention to this part. So students are using chat gpt a lot for making a transition from a generic LOR to an exceptional LOR. And chat gpt sometimes uses words which are something which we would never use in our vocabulary, something which a professor will never write because they appear too perfect for a professor to be writing in their letter. So please refrain from using that. It is really obvious most of the cases when you have taken help from an AI assistant. Another thing where uh, there is a possibility of committing an error is there are several students who write personal anecdotes about their life written from a point of view of the professor. So for example, there was a student who had written that from the point of view of the professor, that this let's say the student's name is X. So X had a dream in his childhood that he wanted to excel in this field. Now, how can a professor possibly know what your thoughts were in your childhood? That is something which is again going to reveal that this is a document which is not authentic. So try to make sure whenever you're making this transition from a generic to an exceptional document that you keep these two pointers in mind. First thing is that preserve the authenticity, and second thing is that don't make use of any of these tools. That's why it's important to spend time on the documents. Getting things done fast will not be a good idea when crafting an excellent LOR. So now, at the end of the letter of recommendation, I just want you to keep some things in mind. If you are a student or a person working in an industry who has at least 1 year, uh, we encourage you to form connections uh, with a professor under whose supervision or a manager under whose supervision you can do research, and maintain that connection for more than 6 to 8 months. Along with it, you can also try to get in touch with some international professors to bring in the diversity element, which I was talking about. So keep in mind the three things: the credibility, the diversity, and the strength of the documents. So let me actually show you one sample LOR. So here is the LOR which was written for Dr. Sridhar, which endorsed uh, several of his research works and academic achievements while at MIT. So I'll be going through this quickly, but I want to point out several things. Firstly, there are a number of paragraphs here. So the LOR really goes for more than 1 page long. Then there are several sections where the professor endorses the student for the research. This is where the professor endorses the student for his research work. You can see that it's written in very detail, and it is technical, which is fine because a professor's writing will most probably be on the technical side. Then there are some areas where the professor mentions about the industrial aspect, where the student worked in collaboration with a company with which their lab had a tie-up with. And then finally, the professor endorses the student for their communication skills. So you can see that there is an all-round endorsement given in this document. So if I am a member of the admission committee and I'm reading this, there is no way I'll give a pass to this document. I'll definitely consider it, and I'll take it through. So please make sure that you plan the letters in advance, and make sure that the credibility, diversity, authenticity, and the strength of the document is taken care of. Let's get to the next section now, which is the resume preparation. And some of you have asked this in the chat as well. So resume is one document which is like a 30 to 60-second pitch to the university. A lot of the admission committee simply go through this document in under a minute, and they form an impression of the candidate, which is what we also do when we are interviewing candidates at our firm. So it's really easy to form a first opinion when you look at the resume. The first thing that strikes you is the formatting. Is the formatting consistent? Is the grammar consistent? The moment you spot any spelling mistake, then the resume will be discarded. So that is the first thing, which is really like a low-hanging fruit. It should be something that should be taken care of. The formatting, we recommend LaTeX formatting, and we recommend that the grammar should be correct. The second thing is, the more the peaks in your resume, the better will be the impact. And by peak, I mean the impactful points which are mentioned in your document. So, for example, a publication can be a peak. Then a patent, a conference presentation, any awards. If you have a GPA which is extremely good, if your class rank is within the top 5, these are all points which attract the attention of the admission committee. So make sure that you highlight these important points right at the start of your resume. Do not mention them somewhere towards the end. We have seen that a lot of students actually sometimes they add a lot of projects, and every single project has a description which is mentioned as a one-liner. So that is not going to really make any impact, because you have to mention the individual paragraphs in detail. So every single point in the paragraph should be impactful. So this is the resume of Dr. Sridhar. And if I am reviewing this resume, there are many things which strike me in the first 30 seconds. First is that the student has a conference publication section, which is rare. Not a lot of students have this section. Within this section, there are multiple points. There are up to 3 to 5 points, which is very impressive. Then they have a patent section as well. Now, this is the first page of the resume, remember. So the moment I lay my eyes on this, out of the 20 resumes which I have probably reviewed in the last 1 hour, this is something which catches my attention first. So that's why we encourage everyone to have a section at the top which distinguishes them. This can be publications, conferences, patents. If you do not have any publications, this can be some impactful project which you have done in your college, impactful project you have done in your industry, but something that distinguishes you. And a lot of times we have seen that students, they think that they do not have any point, but the moment we work out these things with them, immediately something rises up, and then we can identify that there is always something to write about at the start. So try to dig deep and try to find something which you can write at the start of the resume. If you have a lot of time to submit your application, then I encourage all of you to cultivate the hook, which we actually mentioned in the SOP. This is something which is the same. Whatever hook you write in the SOP should go at the start of your resume to make a very high impact. So make sure that your resume looks very professional. The formatting is correct, and every single project is written in a very impactful way. There should be no paragraph in the resume which is just written for the sake of it. One of the things to keep in mind is the master's SOP is usually shorter compared to a PhD SOP, which can go for maybe 3 to 4 pages long, which is all right. If you have a personal portfolio website accompanying your resume, that is excellent. This is something which we did with almost every student we had in last year, along with the long-term mentorship program. And this is something which we started to incorporate, and it makes a huge impact, because uh, it's like a good supplement to your resume. If, let's say, you're writing a project that you have worked on, you can add figures, you can add your photo where you're displaying that project in a conference. Everything can be written in the portfolio website, which can be linked into your resume. So that is an excellent way of developing a link between your resume and your portfolio website, which goes hand in hand. Now, so please keep this in mind as well. There are several candidates whose GPA is not very strong. So for those candidates, as already discussed by Dr. Raj, it can be offset by your hook, which can be either a publication, it can be a research project, it can be a conference presentation, it can be an industry relevant problem which solves something in a very interesting way. We think that highlighting extracurricular activities do not make a lot of impact. They do make some impact for masters, but for a PhD, everyone is looking for your research profile, and it should come across. from the resume. So try to make sure that these elements are taken care of. Finally, I would just like you to show my resume, which I had submitted. So this was a resume which was submitted for a PhD. Just have a look at the first page and immediate things which strike you: publications, presentations, and patents. Then what strikes you is the GPA also. So first page is sometimes one of the most important pages you can have in the resume. Most of the times people are not going to read the second and third page in detail, but the first page actually gives a lot of clarity on the profile of the particular candidate. Next, you can see I have spent a lot of time mentioning my research projects, which is important for a PhD, since the admission committee is looking to see how well your research profile is crafted. And it is completely possible to apply for a PhD right after your undergrad. You can apply for an integrated master's and a PhD program as well. Then later, I dive into professional experiences, socially relevant projects, course projects, and skills. Extracurriculars I mentioned right towards the end. I do not spend a lot of time in this section. Most of the impact is already created in the first and the second pages by seeing the hook of my application and the comprehensiveness of the research projects. So please keep this in mind while drafting your resume. One of the key points that we at Vide should highlight, and which is one of the signatures of our program, is that even if you don't necessarily publish by the time you apply, but you have submitted, or the application or the paper is in preparation, it still makes a lot of impact. And in the long-term mentorship, we actually help candidates to get their drafts, get their projects, or even ideate from scratch to get a publication under preparation. Now, Dr. Raj got an admit into MIT by writing that this publication was in preparation. It got accepted eventually next year, but by the time it was submitted, it was in preparation. The trick is to add the Google Sites link at the bottom and link this. So in this Google Sites, you can see that a preliminary draft of the paper was uploaded with the permission of the professor. So this created a lot of impact. Probably the admissions committee went to this site and saw that, okay, this looks really impactful, and this actually formed the hook of his application, as he was mentioning at the start of the presentation. So some of the do's and don'ts for the resume, which I have already mentioned, is the formatting is very important. Then the length of the resume for masters and PhD is different. Do not mention your marital status, gender, any other points which are absolutely not relevant to your application. Again, this is something which takes at least 2 to 3 months of preparation. So do not keep it towards the end. But this is one of the most important documents. Just one thing that I would like to mention is that the resume and the SOP, if these documents are good, the letters of recommendation is like a glue between these two documents, because it gives a lot of credibility. So let's say you have written that you're working on a project which is in preparation like this. If this professor actually endorses you for the same, then the admission committee has no doubts in their mind. They can actually verify that whatever the candidate has written is endorsed by the professor as well. So it makes sense, and the application overall looks very coherent. So the resume, SOP, and LOR are the three main documents, but this is something which, even though these documents are just overall maybe 6 pages long, there is probably 2 years of effort which goes into drafting these 6 pages. So keep this thing in mind. The last thing that I want to focus on is the exams. Now, the importance of exams, English exams, has definitely gone down from last year onwards. GRE is something which is waived by a number of universities. Still, we encounter a lot of candidates who still prefer to give GRE and TOEFL or GRE and IELTS to be on the safer side, which is all right if you have that paranoid thing in your mind that you want to give English exams. It is completely fine. Just keep in mind that it takes around 2 months of preparation. So if, let's say, you're applying by December, you can start preparing by June, July, and give the exam by August, so that you have time for giving a second attempt if you want to. But you can actually skip GRE for a number of universities, since it is not mandatory. TOEFL though is required for a number of universities. This is relevant for Indians. I know there are other people from different countries, but in India, since the native language is not English, we have to give TOEFL to show the credibility in the English language. So it is actually compulsory in some of the universities. So that's why TOEFL is something which is definitely easier compared to GRE, but it also takes around 2 months of preparation. So the timeline remains the same for the TOEFL exam. Generally, speaking section is something which the students are scared of, because in the examination hall you have to speak while other students are around. So make sure you prepared for this and do not keep this at the last minute. Everything should be planned well in advance. If you are applying for December next cycle, you have already 10 months of preparation, so it is fine. There is still time. Even if you are applying for the spring cycle, you still have time. So make sure you plan for these things accordingly. Now, the next section will be covered by Dr. Sridath, where the research profile building, funding, and then the long-term mentorship will be covered in detail.
Thanks, Rajan Rajat. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Thanks. So first, I would like to cover a little bit about the research profile aspect. This is also very relevant in the context of the questions that many students have asked in the chat. So when we say research profile, we mean very specific items. So typically what we have seen is students who are applying for master's or PhD, almost all of them will have some sort of projects, some sort of research projects. Very few students will have international research internships, which have some value, and even fewer students will have publications, conferences, or patents. Now, you should imagine your goal when you're applying is to distinguish your profile from the rest of the applicants, and especially if you are aiming for good universities, you are really competing with the best of the best from all over the world. And you will not find a single student without a research project. So just having research projects do not carry that much weightage, simply because every student will have that, right? And they can claim that they did something in the project. So ideally, what you should aim is to convert your work into publications, conferences, or patents, because these are tangible outcomes from projects and they have the highest value. International research internships, they are moderately valuable because it can lead to a good LOR from the professor with whom you did the internship. It's also good to show that you have the ability to go places and do things. But ideally, you should still aim to have a tangible outcome from the research which you do at these internships. So instead of making your resume look like a collection of projects and their description, you can have some projects, that is fine, but also try to convert some of them into papers that are under preparation, as Rajat showed from Viraj's resume, or papers that are submitted, or papers that are published, or preprints. Any of those are fine. Preprint you can publish on archive without peer review. So the students do a combination of these things to elevate their status of their research profile. So when the admissions committee see a resume like this, they like this more than a resume with just a collection of projects. Now your question might be, how can you really convert your current ongoing work, or how can you select new problem statements to convert into research articles? And especially if you are trying to apply for spring or fall of this year, 2025, meaning 2025 intake, so you will be applying in 2024, you have some amazing opportunities coming up. There is summertime, there are several months during the semester itself. So professors typically have time if you are thinking of working with them for 6 to 8 months. So in general, the way you can build a mental model about building your research profile is, think about a simple problem statement in your field. The ease of the problem statement is very important, because we have seen so many times students pick a very extremely hard problem statement for their first ever research project and them not being able to complete it. So it's better if your first ever publication is not your best publication, right? Ideally, you will enhance in your career as you advance in your research career. You will publish better papers. So you don't have to publish a Nature or Science worthy paper in your first research. And if you are not really familiar with what all problem statements you can pick, you can do what we all did, which is ask the professors, approach them, or even ask your colleagues. Some of them might have worked on similar problem statements, or You can do your own reading. If you are working in fields like machine learning, there are so many different problem statements on which you can work on. And then think about what kind of solution you can propose in this problem statement, which is slightly different from what is currently being done in the literature. And here also, you don't have to completely change the world. You don't have to aim that, at least at this point, since you are probably just starting your career in this field, right? You can aim to do something very minuscule. And some of you may have ability to do actual physical experiments because you may have access to a professor with a lab, or some of you might be running simulations, some of you might be writing code, writing algorithms. Basically, it should generate results, and then identify what is the value that your experiment or your simulation or your results add on top of what is existing in the literature, and then tell that as a story. Then in the process of telling the story, you will have to make extremely beautiful looking figures, because figures really form the backbone of the paper. And you really have to figure out how to create figures, what softwares you need to understand, etc. Write a paper outline made of bullet points, and then I finally convert the outline into a paper draft. So this is a very structured process. And if you already have some past projects like hobby projects or course projects, you can also convert them into, or projects which you did during your internship, you can think of converting them into journal or conference publications. So think about what problem did you work on, what are the different approaches in which people are trying to solve this problem, what are some demerits of those approaches, and what is a good alternate approach, and is your alternate approach something slightly better? It may have issues, of course. You won't have a solution that is better than everything out there. It's impossible. But if you have some merit, if your approach has some merit, you can think of building that scientific story. And then you will have to say, what is the significance of your result? For example, if you are building a robotic system, for example, in my project, I was building something for cleaning solar panels. And then I had to mention the large scale implication of this. Large scale implication is that globally it can save maybe 40 billion gallons of water. So that's the large scale implication. So you can say something like that, which puts your work in a larger context. And if you think in your past projects, you can think about some answers to these questions. What it means is that you have a paper worthy story. Of course, you may have to do some additional work, but having this story is good enough proof that you can convert some of your past work into papers. And typically in publishing, there are a few different ways in which you can publish. Either you can publish a preprint in arXiv. Maybe some of you are hearing this for the first time. arXiv is a non-peer-reviewed open source publishing platform maintained by Cornell University. It is probably by far the biggest or the most prestigious open source publishing platform. There are other preprint publishing platforms. One is called techArXiv. techArXiv is maintained by IEEE. One of our long-term mentorship students actually past week published a paper on techArXiv. The review process there was actually very fast. So he submitted the paper on January 1st or something like that. It got published by January 10th. So there is no peer review process there in techArXiv or arXiv. It's more like a moderation. So moderators look at the topic of your publishing and the general paper that you have, but there is no blind peer review process. Or you can write a review paper where you are not performing original research, but instead you read a lot of papers from the literature in a particular domain and in a particular topic. For example, if you are working in machine learning is the domain. The topic could be ML or DL for in healthcare for detecting whatever, COVID or any other disease. That could be the general topic that interests you. And then you can read maybe 60 to 80 papers in that domain and then write. And when you read these many papers, you will form an opinion, and that opinion you can convert in the form of a review paper. Or finally, you can publish even single author papers. So single author papers meaning you will be the only first author as well as the corresponding author. You don't need a professor, you don't need a co-author. And many of our students actually worked on single author papers in last year in 2023. So these are the different modes in which you can publish. The bottom line of what we are trying to tell you is that, whether it's a paper story writing process, or whether it's crafting your resume, or whether it is writing your own, you're writing your own LOR so that you can give the draft to your professor, or writing about the hooks you have in your SOP, you are trying to sell your profile. You're not trying to apply for a job. You're not ticking some boxes, right? That's not what you're trying to do. You're not ensuring that you have an SOP. You are ensuring that you have a really good story to tell. So essentially you are acting like a salesperson. Now this is an analogy that we would really like to tell always to the students. So think of yourself as a banana salesperson, where this is your product, your actual product. It has good parts, it has some spotty, not so great regions. So your product is not perfect, just like your profile. Every student has issues, right? Some students may not have good GPA, but they may have some publications, or you may have good GPA without publications, or sometimes you may not have both. Instead, you may have something else. But ultimately, your goal is to sell it in the best possible way, instead of highlighting on the weak aspects of your profile, or instead of thinking about the weak aspects of your profile. So just like how if you were a salesperson who is trying to sell your bananas, you should tell your customers that this is the absolute best product. Your process of building the story for your profile is also exactly like that. You cannot highlight your weakness, and it's a fair game simply because the departments where you are trying to get accepted to, they also have a lot of issues. So some departments may have professors who are not at all good to work with, like toxic professors, or very difficult to work with labs. But they are not going to tell you that. They won't be highlighting that on your website, simply because they want to attract the best talent to their department. Similarly, your goal as a student is to attract the best possible department towards you, right? So it's a fair game that you are trying to upsell your profile instead of shooting yourself in the feet. Now, coming to the other part, funding. So there is funding available for masters or PhD. Typically, there are 4 modes of funding. The most common modes in which you will get funded will be research assistantship, which is RA-ship, or TA-ship, teaching assistantship. So RA-ship is where you are working with a professor in a lab. So funding will mostly come through industry funded project or government funded project. And you may have to submit occasional reports to the sponsor company if it's an industry funded project. And then this will basically cover your entire expenses. Plus on top of that, it will cover your tuition and all the university related fee. Plus it will give you stipend to cover your entire expenses and even to have some savings. Teaching assistantship also will provide you very similar amount of stipend, but here instead of working with a professor in a lab, you will be working with a professor for teaching a particular course. So you won't be teaching, professor will be teaching, but you may conduct office hours, you may help the professor conduct exams or grade the papers, etc. So this is also a very good thing to do if you are aiming to become a professor in the future. So when I was doing PhD at MIT, I was on a research assistantship, RA-ship. So towards the 4th year or 5th year of my PhD, after tax, I was receiving $3,100 per month as the stipend. So this is after covering my tuition fee. I don't have to pay anything for the tuition because it's automatically covered. So rent was around 1,100 depending on where you're living. So we were living together 3 people. So this was per head rent. Food, if you were cooking so much, some of our friends used to cook every single meal. You can even then bring down the food expense so much, but we used to order a lot. So food expense was around this much. Miscellaneous, you may have some Amazon things to order, or you may be traveling a little bit. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you can comfortably save 800 to 1,000 or even much more than that, depending on your lifestyle. And this is a sizable amount of money, right, as a student to get during PhD. And you can really sustain yourself. Even if you have a family, I think like a spouse or something, you can sustain to some extent with this amount of savings. Scholarship and fellowship are the other 2 modes of funding which many students are interested to know, but they are also very difficult to get. They are rare in number. They're also very difficult to get. It's awarded to, so scholarship is awarded to students who are going to pursue certain degree. Fellowship is to pursue a certain problem statement. Fellowship is awarded by different organizations in, let's say, energy sector or carbon dioxide capture or ML for some specific problem statement, etc. Both are difficult to get. So you should not be planning your finances in the hope of getting a scholarship or fellowship. You should have alternate plans like a loan, or if you get RA-ship or TA-ship, no problem. There are a list of several popular fellowships. So we'll be sharing this when we share the recording. You can also get this slide, but there are so many in Europe and US. Of course, you should try applying to these, but but with less expectation on what the outcome is going to be. Before we move on to the long-term mentorship and its detail, because many students are interested to know that, I just wanted to briefly tell a little bit about life as graduate students or PhD students at MIT, Purdue, US in general. These are all premium institutes where you can spend your time. And if you spend 5 years of your life there, you are completely going to be transformed. And this is true not just about your research or your ability to do things, but also as an overall person. So personally, I was a very single unidimensional person during my undergraduate studies at IIT Madras. I was mostly studying. You could mostly find me in the library. I barely did any extracurricular activities. And then I thought during PhD, what may happen is I will become even more, narrow, because PhD, as you know, it's like a strong research. But in fact, what happened is I opened my life towards so many other things. So we used to play cricket. We used to go for skiing trips, binge watching slasher movies, so many things. So it was by far the best years of my life. So and being at the ambience of an institute like MIT will completely transform you in terms of your thought process, in terms of your network. And this is true with any institute that you are aiming for, which is a good school. So the fact that you are all attending this webinar today shows that you want to aim for something like that in your life, and nothing can change your life better than that. So it's a great decision that all of you are trying to take. Long-term mentorship program, this is the last part before we move on to the Q&A, is our signature program by Team Videsh. We started this in 2023 beginning, and I think almost 200 students have graduated from this program in various aspects of the program. So LTM, we are currently starting the 2024 cohort with the aim of helping the students build their research profile, helping them figure out how to tell their story in the application, and ultimately plan their timeline of what to do in the remaining months, right? You have another, if you are applying for spring, you have maybe 4 or 5 months remaining. If you are applying for fall, you have 6-8 months maybe. So it's divided into 2 phases. Phase 1 is about building your research profile. This is purely about writing a review paper and writing a research article. So we'll be helping you figure out every single step in this process, and we are so confident this year simply because we have done this with so many students last year. This will be lasting for almost 3 months. So if you join today, it will last till like maybe close to April. And this is primarily meant for students who want to apply for research internships, and also for MS PhD applicants, because for MS students also research profile is extremely useful. The second aspect of the long-term mentorship LTM is about perfecting your application, which has university shortlisting, SOP, LOR, resume, exam preparation, and building portfolio website. So it's purely focused on if you have done a bunch of random projects, how do you really figure out what's the story that you are going to tell to the university? How do you really figure out which professors who you're mentioning in your SOP, or which universities are you shortlisting, right? So this will be about that. And this is also ideal for students who are applying for research internships, because except for GRE, TOEFL, and university shortlisting, they will need all the other 4. And last year, we actually also worked with several students who applied for MyTax, Charpak, then DAD internships, etc. And the results have not come yet, but we are really hopeful that some of them are actually going to get in. We also have a very nice profile assessment, research profile assessment tool, which are a comprehensive set of questions which students typically take 3 to 5 days to fill. But this is not an AI tool or anything. It's a manual tool for us to assess your profile rather than for you to assess your profile. So it will really help us know when you are joining the long-term mentorship program, how good is your profile, or where is it standing, so that how much stuff need to be done in the next few months. Why we are continuing the LTM 2024, it's mainly because LTM 23 last year was incredibly successful. We worked on so many different papers, which we did not even think was possible. And that too in so many different fields. So I worked with students who were working in architecture, gender studies, machine learning, like pure computer science, molecular biology, etc. And combined, Raj, Rajat, and we worked on so many different topics that I would even say that we learned a huge amount of different fields, which even PhD could not teach us, because PhD we were pretty much in one field. We worked on so many different projects. Students got research internship even at MIT Media Lab. This was purely through contacting professors through cold emailing. Somebody was asking this in the chat. University of Toronto, NTU, etc. We helped a lot of students figure out building their portfolio website. SOPs, hundreds of SOPs, resumes, LORs were crafted. We created some amazing community on Discord. So we'll be sharing the Discord invite link on the chat, using which you can join. So it's called Videsh. It's a Discord community with, I think there are more than 4.5K students there right now. You can ask a lot of questions and figure out, answers to, or you can even find collaborators there. And this year, so many students have actually started getting admit. The results are not fully out yet. Several universities have started giving out admits, like UIUC, for example. Some departments have started. So students have started messaging us already. Some students got it even last month. So we are also so happy to get these messages from students. Many students getting multiple interview calls. Many students getting multiple admits. We had some superstars with us in the last 2023 cohort, whom we are really hopeful, fingers crossed, who will get into top universities like MIT, Stanford. So it was a very satisfying year last year, and we want to make it even more successful this year. So we are really looking forward to that, and we had a lot of feedback even since 2022 itself, when we started the helping students to build their profile. And so these are not the results from 2023 because they are not yet out fully. These are from 2022. And at that time, we really did not have LTM mentorship program. We mostly had just helping students on SOP and resume. And even with that, most of our students ended up getting multiple admits. One of the students I mentored, I clearly remember, he applied to 14 universities and he got into 11 of them. So that was incredibly good. Like I never expected an outcome like that. And some students even got not messages, like when they interviewed with the professors in the department, the professor told them that their SOP was actually one of the best SOPs that they saw in that season. So it was very encouraging to see the outcome of all of that. So, and if you want to join the LTM, we will share the details in the chat, and we'll also share a link to our website here. So that brings us to the last part of today's presentation, Q&A. For Q&A, what you can do is you can continue posting your questions in the chat and we'll be answering through them. And just one last thing. If you are interested to join LTM, you can check out our website. We'll share the link. You can also send an email to hello@flyvidesh.com. But
yes,
please mention your details, okay? Please mention your details of what you do currently, what you want to do, why are you interested in LTM, and please attach your resume. Please don't just do a one-liner, we are interested, simply because we get a lot of emails like that, but we only want to work with students who are super serious about what they want to do, right? So please mention your details. So yes, now we can, I think, go through the Q&A.
Okay, so there are several questions which we have answered in the chat itself. We'll try to find some questions which are unanswered. Meanwhile, you can feel free to type in the chat if you have any questions. So there are some people who are asking what is a good CGPA. So actually that question is very much dependent on the specific profile. For example, we have known candidates with GPA around 8, but with an excellent research profile, and they have got into some of the top 10 universities in the US. Then there are students with a very good CGPA, but a relatively lesser established research profile, and they have not gotten admits into these universities. So it's a combination of a lot of things, actually: your CGPA, your research profile, how well you have crafted all the 3 documents, and then it's a cumulative effect which is taken into account by the admissions committee. So it is difficult to answer that question and provide you with a number, but just try to maintain a good CGPA during your college and work hard. It is definitely important to secure admits into the top universities. Yeah, a number of people had asked questions about the long-term mentorship program, and especially whether it's suitable for first years and second year students, and whether it's restricted to any particular nationality. So actually, the earlier you join the long-term mentorship program, the better, because then you get more time to work on papers. So with one student, what we did is, after the 4-month period of the long-term mentorship is done, he had papers, and then he applied to foreign professors or foreign research groups, and then they selected him. So such kind of great things can happen if you join early. So the earlier the better. Last year we had a good mix of first year, second year, as well as final years, and also industry professionals actually. So if you're a working professional, please don't be restricted thinking that how can I publish a research paper at this stage, or how can I connect back to research. So yeah, all of these are possible within the LTM, and it's not restricted to any nationality. All nationalities are welcome for the LTM program.
So we have attached a link to our website also in the chat. Please find it and visit our website. So there are some questions regarding the how much impact will an international conference have. So this is very important that any conference or any publication which you add in your resume is going to have a lot of impact, because not a lot of students actually have this in their profile, especially when applying for a master's or a PhD, if you are applying for a direct PhD. So make sure you have more of these points. So if you have attended one conference and you have presented, that is great, but don't be satisfied with that. Try to get more and more. If you have, let's say, 3-4 points in the publications and the presentation section, by the time you end up submitting your application, then it will make for a very strong profile, and it will offset the CGPA also. If you have a low CGPA or a relatively low CGPA compared to your peers who are applying in the same field. There is also one question regarding age affecting PhD applications. So that is definitely not the case. In fact, we have had some candidates who are above 45, if I'm not wrong, who applied for a PhD. Then there are several professionals in their 30s and 40s who also wanted to pursue a PhD. So it's more about the profile that you portray in your application that matters when selecting candidates for a PhD. Finally, the professor is going to want a candidate who is going to be an asset for their group, irrespective of the age of that candidate.
So number of people are asking for the LTM fees. So for that, please email at hello@flywithh.com, and we'll be sharing all the details with you. And one more question was there regarding if it is too late to enroll for the LTM, since you are in the last semester and only 3-4 months are left to graduate. So it's not very late actually at all. As long as the master's deadline or the application deadline is 8 to 9 months away, the way we see it is that we have that much time to craft a very strong profile. So the earlier we actually start, the better. It takes around 4 months to have a good literature review paper, an archive preprint, all of that added to your portfolio so that your portfolio becomes strong.
This is a very important point, folks, because last year our experience is that students who joined us earlier actually ended up publishing more papers. So one of the girls whom I was working with, she published 3 papers. She was working in the HCI, Human Computer Interface domain. And students who joined later, like in the month of, so she joined, I think, in February or something, if I remember correctly. But students who joined in July, August, which was another 6 months later, they ended up publishing 1 paper, or that too after their application. So, I mean, it's fine to publish papers after application, but the earlier you start these things, the better. So you should think about building your research profile much in advance. You can probably think about SOP, etc. a bit after a few months. Like, you don't have to think about that, but at least research part you should think about very strongly right now.
There is one good question about the fact that do we have LTM program for pure sciences people? So yes, definitely. Actually, last year there were people from pure physics, pure chemistry. There are around 5 to 6 people like that, and it's not restricted to any field. Also, we had people from economics, from psychology, wide range of fields, because the underlying principles of drafting a research paper, having a portfolio website, crafting strong story for yourself, that is the same for irrespective of the field. So please don't be constrained with respect to field when applying for the long-term mentorship program. So we have few open slots which have opened in January and February. So that's why this program currently has some free slots. So if now is a good time to join and enroll yourself, because later it might be full, as happened last year also.
So typically we reply within a day itself to all the emails that we receive. And so once you receive, once you share the email on our email address, we'll immediately get in touch. Please make sure to add the details in the email as well. And we prefer to work generally with students who are more serious, who want to get into the top universities and who are ready to work hard. these three are one of the main things that we are looking for.
Yeah, some students are raising the hands. If you have questions, it's better to put in the chat simply because there are too many students. Last time we opened the voice chat, it became very chaotic. So please ask your questions in the chat.
So yes, you can directly enroll for PhD after bachelor's. Akshay has asked this question. In fact, Dr. Raj also has done the exact same thing. He enrolled for an integrated program. I know people who have enrolled for a direct PhD also. So in many universities, they have an option of a direct PhD. The difference is that for a direct PhD, you have to do more courses compared to if you have done your master's. So for example, I had done a dual degree from IIT and then I went for my PhD. So I simply had to do 7 courses during my PhD. Whereas my peers who had not done the master's, they had to do 12 courses. So there is a difference in the amount of coursework that you have to do.
There is also a very nice question regarding the fact that if you are an industry professional, how do you navigate your way to finding research internships with professors? So this is a very good question because in the LTM long-term mentorship, we had working professionals with us. So you need some kind of a bridge to be formed before you email professors. And that bridge is having some sort of a research or some sort of a literature review paper or an archive preprint of your work and a portfolio website. So if you have that research and the portfolio website, when you send emails to the professor, your email will be quite strong because then you will have a portfolio website on which research will be there and your industrial work will also be there. So that actually works in your favor. But you need to spend some initial time establishing that bridge for which the long-term mentorship program would be very good.
Yeah, we can see several very specific questions here, like I have X GPA, I work here, and etc. So that will be too difficult for us to answer in 30 seconds. We will need a detailed look at the profile to see what will be good for you and what will not be good for you. If you have such specific questions, you can email us. But if you have generic questions, we'll be answering those through the Q&A here.
So there is a question on how to build a portfolio website. In fact, if you go to our website, we have a specific course which we have designed for the same, which will walk you through all the elements of creating an excellent portfolio website. So we encourage you to visit our website for getting more details, or alternatively, you can also send an email so that we can send you the exact details. But it takes some amount of time and it's something which takes some creativity as well. We have tried to make the process simpler for everyone.
And in general, if people are wondering what is the need for a portfolio website, which we did not cover in too much detail in today's webinar, it's not a mandatory document, but it's something that can tremendously give you a competitive advantage because most of the students will not think about it, but you can create a portfolio website. And if you remember seeing the screenshot from Raj's resume, the document that was in preparation, below that he had given a link to his portfolio website, in which in one of the particular pages that draft of that paper was provided. So it is acting as a proof about your work by providing the links to your papers in your own website, so that admissions committee can see that, okay, whatever you're claiming is actually there. It's just that it has not been published yet. And the good thing is, if it's a paper that is only like 80% written or 50% written, you can continue to make those changes, and it will automatically, you don't have to edit the resume, right? Because you have provided a link. So that's a very, very smart strategy to adopt. And some of our best students last year actually did this, and hopefully it's going to, so that they are even currently they are continuing to working on their research projects. So it will hopefully benefit them.
There is one question from Neelam about, is this the right time to enroll for PhD for fall 24? So fall 24 deadlines have passed already for most universities. There are some universities whose deadlines are in Jan and Feb. So now the next closest intake is, I think one more person had asked this question. So the next closest intake is spring 25 and then fall 25. So spring 25's deadlines will be around June to October of this year. And fall 25's deadline will be around December of this year. Then there is one question from Harshit about the fact that will LTM be beneficial this year or whether you should learn more and enroll for LTM next year. So LTM is a kind of program which helps you build your profile and that will really help you reach professors. If you reach professors right now, they will not reply because you won't have anything to attach in that email. In the LTM, we will help you have a publication, one or two, so that you can attach that in that email, have a portfolio website, and then email professors. The chances of them replying to you will be much, much higher.
Yeah, since
There
we
are
are really familiar with the profile of all the students in this webinar, if you are in first year or final year, it does not matter. I think building a research profile is something that you can start as early as possible, right? So, and LTM is really meant for those students. And some students, when they joined us, they had literally zero experience in that field. Like one of the students that we recently published a tech archive machine learning paper with, he had built, he had coded nothing with respect to ML or even anything. And he went from almost zero to writing a paper and actually publishing it. And all of this happened in a span of around 3 to 4 months. So, and it happened because the steps that we are, the only commitment that we ask from students is like, 8 to 12 weeks, 12 hours per week of work. If you can manage that much as a working professional or as a student, you can pretty much do what your seniors did last year.
And so regarding international internships, right, there is a specific way. So Shridhar and Rajat both did international internships at their undergraduate. They did the DAD international internship. There are a very big range of programs. When we share the recording with you, please go to that slide which had the programs list. And there you will find the list of these international internships and you can just apply to them. When you apply, right, you will need some things like maybe letters of recommendation from professors or resume, something like that. But just apply and then you can increase your chances of getting these international internships.
there are some students who have messaged me saying that they are in their initial years and want to transition to the field of machine learning. And someone has inquired about the field of scientific machine learning as well. So for everyone who is in the engineering domain, which is not necessarily CS, and would like to transition and develop a research project or even publish, then we are coming up with a SciML bootcamp soon, and we'll keep you guys updated with the details. So this will actually take care of this question in complete detail.
Yes, if you want to register for the wait list of that bootcamp, we are just going to share a link right now in the chat. So I'm just looking for that. Yeah. So if you can go to this link and just fill this name here, you will be added to the wait list of this scientific machine learning bootcamp. So please go to this link, just add your first name, last name, email address, and WhatsApp number, and then you will receive the update of the machine learning bootcamp when it's ready.
Many students are asking questions regarding GPA. I think it's a common worry of the students. Most of the students have average GPA. Some students have poor GPA. Some students have high GPA. In general, for getting research internships also, maybe DAD, MITAX, etc. might be difficult without a GPA. However, that's not the only way to get into international research internships. You can get through pure cold emailing. Now, when you write a cold email, it has to have a structure, and the structure has to be very good. So one of the students who's about to get into a DAD program now, so when I sent a cold email when I was applying for DAD, I remember sending almost 200 to 300 emails. I got maybe 15 replies, 15, out of which maybe 2 or 3 were positive. So it was very, very poor conversion rate, like response rate. But then that time I was also very amateur. I did not know how to email professors. But then now we have very good idea. And then this student who emailed according to what we told him, he sent 40 emails, just 40. I was encouraging him to send more, but he only sent 40. He got almost 19 or something like that responses, which is 50%. And out of that, I think 5 or 6 was positive. So it's a very high response rate. So you can accomplish so many things through cold emailing in the right manner. Of course, you have to have things associated with it. You have to have some kind of work, some research done, some portfolio website to attach with in the email, etc. You have to have a good structured resume, but you can accomplish so many things through cold emailing, even if you have a poor GPA. And that is one of the ways in which, so in the slides we showed that a student got into MIT Media Lab for internship. So that was a pure it's a virtual internship because it was in the middle of the semester. but it was accomplished through pure cold emailing. Nothing involved, right? So GPA was not mentioned, nothing was mentioned. He had done some work, he sent cold email, and it worked out. So don't worry if you don't have very high GPA. It's not a big deal. One of our good friends who's still doing PhD at MIT, I think her GPA was either 7.9, something like that, or early 8.1, something somewhere around that, which is not very high, from IIT Madras. And she had, I think, 5 or 6 publications to her name, and MIT was the only university in which she got admitted. So it's amazing how sometimes these admission process works. Sometimes universities are really willing to give you a chance, as top universities, even if you don't have a very high GPA. So please don't worry about your GPAs. Of course, you can't change it too much if you are in your 4th year or something like that, 3rd year or 4th year. But try to build your research profile, try to build the story of your application in the right way. We can do that all in LTM, but don't worry about your GPA too much.
There are a number of misconceptions about MIT generally. I see in the chats, like someone asked whether it's needed to have 10 or 20 research papers to get into MIT. And Nikhil has asked about some whether MIT does look for A-star conferences or impact factor. So regarding the first question, we do not need 10 or 20 research papers. I just had one good research publication, but that was in a very prestigious journal. It took me around 1.5 to 2 years to have an publication in that journal. So if you are a student and if you have an ML publication in NeurIPS or ICML, that carries a huge weight compared to, let's say, someone who has 10 publications in conferences which no one knows. Secondly, MIT and other top colleges do value the impact factors of conferences, and A-star conferences carry weightage. So if your conference is a good venue and it's prestigious and it's known by professors at MIT, it carries a huge value. Whereas if it's a name which no one has heard of and the impact factor is also 0.5 or 1, then that does not carry too much weight.
There is one question which I saw a couple of times regarding how does a patent compared to a journal or research profile. It is highly valuable. It's in a different way. Patent is more about inventing something and claiming a novelty in that. It's not more about scientific writing. It's more about figuring out what are the best ways in which you can make broad claims about if it's a methods patent, or if it's like if it's something else. So it definitely has huge value. In my opinion, it has more value than most of the unheard of conferences or unheard journal names. Definitely having patents carry value. So Rajat had patent even during his undergrad. So it helped him a lot during application. So it's amazing that you already have patent if you are currently thinking for grad school.
There are some questions about people saying that in our LinkedIn posts, we write a lot about the lab culture and how to identify or assess the lab culture before joining. So one of the best ways which I realized late is that we can talk to the graduate students at that particular lab. We can message them on LinkedIn, Gmail, get in touch with them and try to ask them questions about the culture. Do they work on Saturdays and Sundays? If everyone works on Sunday, it's a sign of a toxic environment. So just talk with them and try to have an honest read of what the lab is. Secondly, if you're going for a PhD, right, the QS university rankings don't matter too much. What matters is the research group and whether you will be a good alignment to the research group. So Megha was saying that while shortlisting labs, she was focusing more on the research area. That's a good way instead of the QS rank. For a PhD, once you enter the university, it will not matter what's the rank of the university because you will have to spend 5 years in your lab. So if you don't like the research group or if it doesn't fit well culturally with you, it will be a miserable experience like mine was in the initial 2 years of my PhD. And then I switched groups and then everything changed. From that experience, I realized the importance of having a good PhD advisor.
So there is a question by Karan which asks about what is the right time to apply. So we had several students in the current LTM in a similar position as you. They basically did not have developed the research profile at all. In fact, it had to start from scratch. And the example which Dr. Sridhat was giving is a prime example of the effect which LTM has had on the candidates. That particular student we took from 0 papers to 3 papers in a span of 6 to 8 months. And that is just one example. There are several students who started their research from scratch, and in a span of 6 months, with our guidance, they were able to chalk out a very decent research trajectory, which helped a lot when they submitted their applications. So there is also a misconception that 3-4 years are required, let's say minimum, to publish a research paper or to have any kind of conference paper. So that is really not true. In fact, we have seen while working with several students in the LTM, students who are hardworking, students who are proactive and really want to publish, they can do it within a span of 6 to 8 months if given the right guidance and they go about it in the correct manner. So it's just a matter of being proactive and being optimistic about your chances. So if you are applying, let's say for December of 24, you still have around 10 to 11 months, and this is true for all candidates who are planning to apply for fall of 25. 9 to 10 months is still a very decent time to build your research profile, and we encourage to start right from the month of January. We have seen that in college, students get distracted a lot. They do a lot of stuff, including internships, not necessarily internships, but they volunteer for some campaigns in their campus. Then they organize some events, etc. Most of these uh, most of these activities are not necessarily relevant in building your profile when you're submitting an application for graduate studies. So spend this time in a very laser focused manner and try to prioritize your time on things that are going to matter in building your profile.
We can maybe take one or two more questions since it's already 8:30. So there is a question, yeah, about where LTM guides for master's applications. Yes, 100% for both masters as well as PhD. LTM is for both.
So last year, one remark is there were several students who joined our webinars, who used to join our webinars in the early months of last year. But unfortunately, they reached out to us in November, December. But then by then we had already committed to so many other students who had joined the LTM, so we could not help them. So if you are listening to this, we really hope you will not reach out to us in September, October, November, those months. If at all you are reaching out to us, please do early. At least you can have that one takeaway from this webinar. Other than that, everything else will work out. Like many students are stressed about these applications. We receive emails and messages from students who feel a lot of stress. We don't think it that much needed if you are preparing in a systematic way. If you have a good mental model that you strongly believe in. We received a lot of help from our seniors when we were applying, and we created a plan for ourselves during that, like few months before the application, and we stuck to the plan, and we strongly believe that's really what worked out for us. But not many students have that kind of a mentorship available. So if you do have available, stick to your plan. If you don't have that kind of a structured mentorship available, you can consider LTM.
Okay, guys, I think we are almost at the end of time. We have again mentioned our email address, our website name, which I'm mentioning right now for you to just go and check out the different options which are there. And if you like this webinar, please consider writing us the Google review for Fly Videsh and mention about your experiences. Thank you everyone for attending this webinar, and please don't take any stress regarding the application. It's good that you have started early.
Okay, everyone. Thank you so much for attending.
Hope you
All the best. Bye bye.
We'll definitely be conducting more webinars in the future regarding specific aspects of application. But hope you got an overall overview from today's webinar. Thank you so much and have a good night.
Thank you, everyone. Bye bye. Good night.